And with me now to discuss all of this is the Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson of Louisiana. Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for joining us. So you were part of a congressional gold medal ceremony today that posthumously honored the 13 American service members killed in the Kabul airport bombing during the Afghanistan withdrawal. You met with some of the Gold Star families. What were their emotions like today?
It was a day of high emotion for all of us, for the members of Congress, the Senate, and the House who were participating in the ceremony. The gold medal, as you know, the Congressional Gold Medal is the highest honor that we can give to any group or individual, and it was right to bestow it upon these families. 13 service members, as was noted many times today, they were brothers and sisters and fathers. They were the best of America, and they gave their lives in Afghanistan, and it didn't have to happen. That's the great tragedy of the whole thing.
The most objective analysis of the withdrawal from Afghanistan I've seen faults both the Trump administration and the Biden administration for the disastrous withdrawal. The Trump administration part being for the Doha Agreement, what H.R. McMaster called a surrender to the Taliban, McMaster being Trump's second national security advisor. In fact, before the Abbey Gate disaster back in 2021, Mr. Trump bragged about how he was responsible for the war ending and for the deadline. Take a listen.
I started the process. All the troops are coming back home. They couldn't stop the process. 21 years is enough, don't we think? 21 years. They couldn't stop the process. They wanted to, but it was very tough to stop the process.
Do you hold the Trump administration responsible at all for the way the U.S. got out of that war?
Absolutely not. And what I would like to do is commend to your audience the reading of the House Foreign Affairs Committee's extensive report that was published and released publicly today. They've looked into this for over 3 years. The first year, the Democrats stalled the investigation, but it's an alarming set of facts, and it is objective facts that are proven by testimony and the extensive investigation. What it shows is the Doha Agreement was a conditional agreement. Certainly, President Trump made that a priority to try to end the conflict in Afghanistan, but the conditions of that were not met, and so obviously he did not go through with the withdrawal. President Biden did, and what we know from the investigation and what the facts that have come out show clearly is that this was an abject failure. It was a total catastrophe in the way that it was handled. They were concerned much more about the optics than they were the safety of our service members. And that's why people died, and that's why hundreds of Americans were left behind. That's why $17 billion in military equipment was left in the hands of the Taliban. It's why the Taliban took over. By the way, President Biden and Kamala Harris insisted that no one projected that Afghanistan would fall if we pulled the troops out. Now we know that that was not true. There was a number of intelligence officials and top military officials from the Department of Defense who said exactly the opposite. They had no emergency withdrawal plan, Jake. They had never more than a day's supply of food and water at the airport there. It was a total failure from top to bottom, and brave service men and women died because of that. And I'll point out today, we read the names of those 13 service members who lost their lives. Their families said that was such a relief to them. We apologized to them. To this day, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have not said the names of those service members. In fact, Joe Biden said on the debate stage in June that we hadn't lost any service members on his watch. I guess he forgot about them.
What do you say to those who say that this report by the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and we had Chairman McCall on the show yesterday to discuss the report, but what do you say to those who look at this report and say that given that the interim report in 2022 only mentioned Vice President Kamala Harris twice, and this latest report released yesterday mentions her more than 280 times, that makes it look more political?
Well, Jake, I think what the report reflects is Kamala Harris's own admission. She bragged until recently that she was the last person in the room with Joe Biden before he made all these fateful decisions. She tied herself to all those decisions, and she is the co-sponsor and co-owner of the results. That's her own testimony. That's her own words. That's what she wanted the American people to believe. And so they went back to properly annotate that and note it in the report. That's what the investigation showed, and Congress has an obligation to put the facts out there and let the American people decide. I think the decision on this one is not difficult. I think people understand what's happened. By the way, they have subjected over 20 million Afghanistan women to horrible human rights abuses because they're now at the mercy, at the peril of the Taliban. This never had to happen. They erased 20 years of progress that we had made there. We've had thousands of American troops serve in that theater, and we lost almost 2,500 servicemen and women. All that was erased by this catastrophic foreign policy disaster, and I think it's one of the worst in American history, and I think that's what the history will show, and I think that's what the facts show.
Well, I'm not defending Biden or Harris or the withdrawal. I am just noting that the Doha Agreement and the release, for example, of 5,000 Taliban prisoners and the motion of this agreement to withdraw all U.S. troops was started by President Trump. So are you saying that Donald Trump would not have withdrawn U.S. troops, even though he was, in that clip we just played, taking credit for it in the summer of 2021? Are you saying that the U.S. should still have troops in Afghanistan right now?
No one can go back in history, and it would be total conjecture on our part to determine where we would be right now if none of this had happened. It is true, obviously, that President Trump wanted to get us out of Afghanistan, but he was a wise and judicious leader on that front. He had a foreign policy that made sense. He would never have abandoned our troops to be killed there at the airport. He would have had a plan to get out, and when the conditions were not met, he decided not to withdraw. That is a fact that no one can change. Biden did, and he did it haphazardly, and people died because of it, and an untold number of people are suffering because of that decision even today. Those 13 service members who passed, their families, as they said in their own words today in that moving ceremony in the rotunda, they'll have to live with that every day of their lives. We all do. We mourn their loss, and it never had to happen, and America owes them a great debt of gratitude, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris owe them an apology.
I want to turn to government funding because this afternoon, former President Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, if Republicans in the House and Senate don't get absolute assurances on election security, they should in no way, shape, or form go forward with a continuing resolution on the budget. The Democrats are trying to stuff voter registrations with illegal aliens. Don't let it happen. Close it down, unquote. Your colleague in the Senate, your counterpart, Minority Leader Republican Mitch McConnell, is pushing back against Donald Trump's demand that House Republicans shoot down this continuing resolution to fund the government, which you've spent a lot of time trying to get passed. McConnell says shutting down the government is always a bad time. Who do you side with when it comes to passing the continuing resolution to continue to keep the government open, Mitch McConnell or Donald Trump?
I don't think they're saying different things, Jake. I think President Trump is saying exactly what I have been saying, and that is we need assurances on election security and to fund the government. We should get those assurances, and here's why. The American people believe at a rate of 87%, that's what the last poll says, that only U.S. citizens should decide U.S. elections. That is federal law right now, but it is not being abided by because we don't have any proof of citizenship required. That's all the SAVE Act does. That's why we attached it to the continuing resolution to fund the government. Every Democrat in Congress here is suggesting right now that they would oppose that. There's no reason to oppose it. We should do a resolution to fund the government. Everybody agrees with that. And they should all agree that we need a free and fair election. But we can't guarantee that unless we get the SAVE Act passed. That is what's going to prevent this hijinks of non-citizens voting. It is a real issue. We have a number of states who have done audits of their voter rolls and found thousands of non-citizens on their voter rolls, and it's in some of the swing states. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Georgia, states that could determine the outcome of the election. It certainly could determine congressional races. Some of these races in modern times, you know, Jake, you and I have talked about this. I have a colleague who won her first race in 2020 by 6 votes. We routinely have members who win a seat in Congress by 200 or 300 votes. So if you just have a small percentage of the 10 million plus, I think the number is 16 million illegal aliens who have come across the border since Biden and Harris opened that border wide, if just a small percentage of them participate, we have serious chaos in the election. So this is a simple matter that should be done in a bipartisan manner, but the Democrats here don't want to do it. In fact, 198 House Democrats already voted against the SAVE Act, and they have no explanation as to why.
Well, I think they think that it's already against the law for undocumented immigrants, for non-citizens to vote, and they think that this is creating an election issue where there really is not any evidence of widespread undocumented immigrants voting. But let me turn to this last issue.
Well, wait, Jake. Let me just
thoughts on this. Okay.
Look, I was just going to say this. it is illegal for underage persons to buy alcohol, right? But we don't let them come to the liquor store and check a box and say, I'm over 21. We ask for identification. We require ID for all sorts of transactions in society. Voting is a sacred thing. Why would we not require proof of citizenship? It doesn't matter that you have a statute that says it's illegal for non-citizens to vote. If you're not enforcing it, it has no import. And that's all we're saying. This is common sense. The American people demand it and deserve it, and we're going to fight for it.
I think young people trying to get alcohol is a bigger problem in this country than undocumented immigrants wanting to vote. But let me ask you about the debate.
Jay? The sanctity of our elections is a big, big thing.
I think that our elections are very important. I think that there is a lot of data and evidence that young people getting alcohol is a major problem in this country.
Of course it is.
And I don't think that there is the same, there is not the evidence that undocumented immigrants running to vote every November is the same problem. I don't even think you can compare the two.
Well, look at Georgia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas. No, I'm trying to create a simple example that in society we require proof to do things, and that's how we prevent the law from being broken. And there are a number of states who have shown they have non-citizens on the voter rolls. That is enough to create chaos in the election, and we have to stop it.
You have advised House Republicans to avoid attacking Vice President Kamala Harris in ways related to her race and gender. Donald Trump has done both in the past, attacked her relating to her race and to her gender. Do you give him the same advice tonight? Should he stick to the issues and stick to the policies as you've advised House Republicans to do that?
Yeah, I'm consistent. I've talked with the president. I talk with the president a lot, President Trump, and that has always been my advice, that we run this race on policy, on record, not rhetoric, on policy, not personality. Kamala Harris was the most liberal member of the Senate in the modern era. She was to the left of Bernie Sanders. She has a lifelong record that is far left. She's a San Francisco radical. But they're engaging in a campaign of fantasy over fact right now. And what we have to do is make sure the American people know the truth about who Kamala Harris is and what her values and her philosophy are. She's going to try to convince the American people tonight, for example, that she's great on the economy. She'll solve the problem. She was the head cheerleader of Bidenomics. I mean, she's going to try to convince everyone that she can solve all these problems in their lives. She's been in the administration for 3.5 years and hasn't done a single bit of it. She has a big task ahead of her tonight, and I don't think she's going to perform well, because that record is hard to run from.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Jake.